We are less than 1 week away from the 2025 NFL Draft, and before player values change drastically in either direction, I wanted to run through a list of 12 players that I believe are Dynasty roster cloggers that you should be trading immediately prior to the NFL Draft. So the first name on the list is also the biggest name, kind of by far, and he's on the border of being a roster clogger versus an actually relevant and helpful player on your roster, and it's George Pickens. Now, after the DK Metcalf trade and extension, Pickens has been left in a very precarious spot on the Steelers roster, considering their history of not wanting to extend receivers and their willingness to let those who we perceive to be good wide receivers just walk in free agency or get traded. Since the team now has a long-term commitment to DK Metcalf, I highly doubt that they do the same with George Pickens now, so he's either going to walk in free agency next offseason or possibly get traded by the deadline this year. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Pittsburgh drafted a receiver in the first 3 rounds this year, because they've done so practically every single year since 2017. In 2017, it was Juju Smith-Schuster, 2018, James Washington, 2019, Deontay Johnson, 2020, Chase Claypool. Nobody was drafted in 2021 at the receiver position, but they did draft Pat Freiermuth in the second round. No one in 2022 or 2023. Calvin Austin was a day 3 pick in 2022. And then Roman Wilson last year was a second round pick. So in a class filled with some pretty good wide receiver twos, they might draft somebody on day 2 to be that replacement for George Pickens next year, unless they really believe that strongly still in Roman Wilson coming back from injury. And they've also used top 30 visits on Matthew Golden, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, and Savion Williams. And this is all not even to mention that George Pickens' production is probably taking a hit this year with the addition of DK Metcalf, who I do believe is honestly better than George Pickens. Plus, they still don't have a quarterback, so whether it is Aaron Rodgers or it's Mason Rudolph or some rookie that they draft this year, none of those options are very enticing for 2025 production as the wide receiver 1B or even wide receiver 2 on a more run-first Arthur Smith offense. If you can still get a first-round pick for George Pickens in any year over the next few years, do it, but I would sell for an early second. Next up is Pickens' teammate Jaylen Warren, and I know, no surprise, let's sell the guy who's probably going to get replaced in the NFL Draft, but I don't think you guys realize how bad this might be for Jaylen Warren. Out of the Steelers' 30 top 30 visits, they've used 9 of them on running backs, including top names like Omarion Hampton, Travion Henderson, and Caleb Johnson, plus a handful of all of your favorite sleepers in Bashal Tutin, RJ Harvey, DJ Giddens, Jaden Blue, Dylan Sampson, and Ollie Gordon. Pretty much every single one of those running backs are better than Jaylen Warren right now, and most of them offer a true 3-down skill set. And depending on the draft capital that they invest in a running back this year, it will either mostly affect Jaylen Warren to annihilate him completely. Plus, he is a free agent next year, so it's likely he's not even on the Steelers again in 2026, and by then he's going to be a 27-year-old free agent who's probably signing a 1-year backup deal at best to be an RB2 somewhere else. There's no reason to continue holding on to him when you can sell him for a mid-second right now. And why not just keep the Steelers train going, or should I say former Steeler, in Najee Harris, who signed a cheap 1-year deal with the LA Chargers that artificially raised his value for about a month and a half before this NFL Draft. But again, if the Chargers draft a running back this year, and depending on who it is and when, Najee could be moderately affected to also completely annihilated because the Chargers have no ties to him after this year, and he could be just this year's version of Rachaad White. I actually broke down more of why I'm selling Najee right now in this video that I'm going to link up here, but I would also be selling him for an early to mid-second. And while we're on the conversation of multiple players on the same team, let's move over to Deebo Samuel on the Washington Commanders. This isn't even so much of a draft take as it is just get out of Deebo Samuel. In 15 games played last year, Deebo only caught 51 passes for 670 yards and 3 touchdowns. For comparison, that is pretty much the same production as Demario Douglas, Ray McCloud, and Wan'Dale Robinson. But because it's still the name Deebo Samuel, we care a lot more. And he did still add 136 yards and a touchdown on 42 rush attempts, but is he going to get that same rushing volume in Washington? Can we even expect Deebo to beat his 2024 numbers when the wide receiver 2 on the Commanders, which was Olamide Zaccheaus last year, barely broke 500 yards himself? I get that Washington has lost a lot of receivers behind Terry McLaurin, and they only added Deebo Samuel to replace a bunch of them, but McLaurin is still there. Zach Ertz is also back. Those were the top 2 targets for Jaden Daniels last year, and I don't really know know if Debo is going to change that. And what I also find likely is Washington drafting a receiver as well. I just said before this that it's a very good class for wide receiver 2s, and Washington has been doing their due diligence on this whole entire crop of rookies this year with combine meetings, pro day meetings, or even top 30 visits with a bunch of good receivers like Trey Harris, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, Kyle Williams, Jack Besh, Alec Ayometer. I mean, if they pull the trigger on a guy on day 2, Debo's value takes an even bigger hit for Dynasty from situation, not just from recent production anymore. Take a mid to late second round pick and run. And I said we have multiple Commanders players, so now let's talk about both running backs in Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler, both of whom could be on the chopping block if Washington goes for an elite rookie running back, even as early as round 1 on Thursday night. Running back has been one of the most talked about needs for Washington this draft season, and many mocks have seen them pull a guy like Travion Henderson in round 1 or Judkins or Johnson in round 2, none of which would honestly surprise me. This offense needs playmakers around Jaden Daniels, and a dynamic 3-down running back could be just what Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury are looking for this year. I will say I am a lot more worried about holding on to Austin Eckler just given his age and the fact that he could technically still be cut to save $3.5 million, so he's not a 100% lock to make the final roster in the fall. I very much doubt that actually happens, but at the very least, he's a 30-year-old running back right now who will be a 31-year-old free agent next year and could lose his job to a more dynamic rookie this week. Brian Robinson does seem slightly safer just given his skill set. If Washington just wanted to replace Austin Eckler with a more pass-catching back, keep Brian Robinson as that pounder and goal line back, but he is also a free agent next year. He's going to be 27 years old too next year, so I would be selling Brian Robinson right now for any second-round pick, and I'd be selling Austin Eckler for multiple third-rounders if you can get it. Keeping at the running back position, Isiah Pacheco's dynasty value is in critical condition right now after a lost 2024 season due to injury, then the Chiefs re-signing Kareem Hunt, and also adding Elijah Mitchell in free agency. And I also would not be shocked if they drafted someone too as a more long-term option, given Kareem Hunt's age, Elijah Mitchell's injury history, and him signing only a cheap one-year deal, and Pacheco himself also being a free agent after this season. I've actually gotten a fair number of questions regarding what to do with Isiah Pacheco, and my answer to all of them have all been the same. It's to sell if you can. It does seem that some people still value him as a possible starter, and I just don't really know if that's the case. He's honestly much closer to a waiver wire player to me than someone who could actually make your starting lineup. Actually, apparently on Keep Trade Cut, you can still get a mid to late second round pick for him, and I would be doing that instantly, if not even for a couple of thirds. All right, let's end on a wide receiver train with everyone here being roster clogging sells because of the possibility or even probability of a rookie wide receiver joining their teams. The most valuable guy on this list is Keon Coleman because of his age and draft capital last year. He didn't have a bad rookie season, but it also didn't really inspire a ton of confidence as a multi-year guy and relevant piece for dynasty rosters. He is fun, but he's most likely someone that you're not going to be starting given Buffalo's willingness to run the ball, and when they do pass the ball, they spread the ball around to everyone. Plus, they already tried adding an ex-receiver last year with Amari Cooper. It just didn't really pan out for them with his injury, plus his age and contract situation, so I wouldn't really be shocked if Buffalo tried again in the draft with a Trey Harris or a Jaden Higgins type X receiver, maybe even a Jalen Royals. So an already crowded pass catching room gets even more crowded, and Coleman's not the type of receiver to demand targets on the outside. I would be selling for any second really, but if you can especially get a mid to early second, I would be doing that in a heartbeat. Now Cooper Kupp is next as the de facto wide receiver 2 in Seattle because they really have no one else besides Jackson Smith and Jigba, but the Seahawks can draft someone as their more long-term wide receiver 2 easily in the mid-first or mid-second round. Matthew Golden has actually been a very popular pick for them in mock drafts in the first round, and it makes sense from an NFL perspective since their offense needs a little bit of speed and it would allow him time to develop more into a receiver in the NFL. Plus, this is also assuming that Cooper Kupp is actually still good and not what we saw to end the year last year as he was effectively phased out of the Rams offense over the last 5 to 6 weeks, including the playoffs. And he's catching passes from Sam Darnold, who might also be worse in a non-Sean McVay / Kyle Shanahan system with worse pass-catching weapons. I am terrified of Cooper Kupp right now in Dynasty, so much so that in the one league that I do have him in, I actually sent an offer to sell him for 3 third-round picks, 2 of which are very late this year. So we'll see if that gets accepted because that team is a contender who could use an extra wide receiver. And if you're in the same situation, I would be doing the exact same thing with selling Cooper Kupp for multiple third third round picks. And the last three are all pretty much in the same boat. They're young wide receivers who flashed last year but are not long-term solutions and probably will get replaced this week. Cedric Tillman, Marvin Mims, and Quentin Johnston. If Travis Hunter goes to the Browns at 2 overall, then that's curtains for Cedric Tillman, who all we really have to go on is a 4-week stretch with Jameis Winston at quarterback, who is a markedly better quarterback, or at least better fantasy quarterback, than Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco. Marvin Mims is probably getting more receiver competition with a rookie wide receiver 2 across from Cortland Sutton, plus the competition that he already has from having Evan Ingram there now. I've never really been on Marvin Mims, but I know he has some truthers out there and people who just want to believe in a young guy, but I would be re-rolling the dice with a third-round pick. And speaking of guys that I've never believed in, if the Chargers don't draft a receiver in the first 3 rounds this year, I would be shocked, or at the very least, drafting a quality tight end, which they have met with Colson Loveland and they've met with Mason Taylor. They very well could leave day 2 with Colson Loveland in round 1, Caleb Johnson in round 2, and then a Jalen Royals type receiver in round 3, and that would wreck everybody on this team besides Justin Herbert and Ladd McConkey. Not to mention how much fun it would be if they do actually re-sign Keenan Allen. There's just no way that I'm holding Quentin Johnston by the time the draft starts on Thursday. But if you guys are looking for 3 more players to both buy and sell, especially before the NFL draft, then you can check out this video right up here.